Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Chris Francis with churchfilmmakers.com. We are finally back. I know it's been a while since our last tutorial, but what I want to do today is I actually want to break down a project, and it is a sermon bumper that we did for the Rock Church with the music artist Propaganda. So if you have not watched it yet, first, make sure you watch that. It should be right above me if you're on the website. If you're on YouTube, click the link in the show notes. Watch that first so you know what we're talking about. All right, let's dive into how we actually did this thing. So first of all, to give you some context about the project, this was a sermon bumper for a sermon series called What If? And the whole premise behind the sermon series was, what if we actually started praying and believed that God was going to do stuff? What if we actually took Jesus at his word when he said that you would do greater things than he did? What would your life look like? What would your prayer life look like? What would your devotional life look like if you actually believed that the stuff in the Bible could actually happen with you? So I forget exactly how this all came about, but in true church world fashion, we did this project completely backwards, basically. Our team booked Propaganda, who's a hip-hop artist. You've probably heard of him. If not, check out the link in the show notes. He's awesome. And we commissioned him to kind of come up with a spoken word / rap. We kind of gave him the concept of what the sermon series was going to be. Him and his producer had beats and background music that they could use. So we actually commissioned him, had some meetings, and he was working on that. In the meantime, we were figuring out what in the world we were going to do for our sermon bumper. The first Sunday was coming up and we had to have something. So literally we had some last second brainstorm meetings and even completely changed what we were going to do in the last second. I think I came up with this idea literally the day before our last brainstorming session, pitched it. Fortunately, the team liked it and we went with it, and I think we were shooting it in like a couple of days after that. So I had this image of these old school boxing matches where kind of the microphone comes down and you've got the announcer. And so the idea was like, what if this was like some sort of underground gathering? And then Propaganda, who would be representing the Holy Spirit, came through and just kind of blew everybody away with a rap that really reminded people and kind of stirred people up about what Jesus said. So visually, my references for this project were Fight Club, a couple of images that I'm showing right now of like an old school boxing announcer, and then also I think at the time John Mark McMillan's Future Past music video from the Callan Brothers had just come out, and what I liked about all of these visual references was kind of like they all had like a top light source, kind of in an obscure warehousey underground type background. So whoever was kind of in the spotlight was lit. And then I really love the fall off into the crowd. As you can kind of see with the Fight Club, actually with all these images, you have no idea how many people are there because it just fades to black. So it kind of leaves a good enough space for your imagination to kind of fill in the blank and kind of wonder who this group of people are, what they're doing, how many there are. So I really like that visual, and I kind of pitched that idea, and then very quickly I had to figure out how in the world do I create this, because at the time I had no idea. So my internet sleuthing, if you will, led me to realize that, well, I needed a big top off source of light, and I needed it to fall off in the crowd. But because of limitations of gear and location and time and budget and crew, and most importantly know-how, that kind of limited what we did. So as you can see here, this is kind of what we came up with. Basically what we did is we did a 10 by 10 bleached muslin on maybe a 10 by 10 or 12 by 12 frame. We used the tallest light stands that we possibly had to get it up as high as we could. Probably got to about 12 feet and was maybe it was tall enough. In an ideal world, we would have had the light coming from above that source, but because of the high ceilings and because we didn't have too much proper grip and electric gear, we had to bounce it. At the time, literally I didn't know a whole lot about lighting. Hadn't worked with a gaffer too much at that point. This was about 4 years ago. So I just knew we needed a big light, and anytime I think big light, I always think of a 1.2 HMI. So puts off a ton of light. As you can see in the photos there, we really didn't need that much light. So you can see that we're almost wasting off almost at least half the light as we're bouncing it into that white source. We ended up putting a CTO gel on it, which basically just turns the color temperature, because it's normally a daylight color temperature, probably close to 5,000 Kelvin. And with the CTO gel, that gets it closer to 3,200 Kelvin, since the rest of the lights we were using is tungsten. So it just gives it that kind of orangey feel. And then what else we did lighting wise, we had 3 Arri 650 lights that the church owned. And I just kind of put those in the back to provide not only like a hard edge and backlight, but also to add some extra flare goodness to the lens. So circling back a little bit on how we actually pulled this project off, we knew that we needed as many people as possible to kind of be our underground crowd. So our awesome producers started hitting the phones, the emails, get as many people as we could. I think in an ideal world, we would have had like 40, 50 people. I think we ended up with like close to 20, which was pretty amazing for an all-day shoot in the middle of the day. So we got an awesome crew of people that were stoked to be in a propaganda video and kind of see the whole behind the scenes. So that was pretty awesome. But what we had to do is we had to be really strategic with our lens selection, with our staging and blocking, how we're gonna light it to make it feel like a much bigger crowd. And what we did to try to help create the illusion of more people being there than there really was is that we stuck to longer lenses. I think we used a 50mm lens for the wide, so to speak, and a 100mm lens for the close-up. So even at its widest, even with the anamorphic, you're not seeing too much of the background, so that helped cheat some things. And then what we did is, like on this master wide shot, I had just a couple of people stand right in front of the lens to kind of help create the illusion that there are people completely circled around propaganda. But if you start looking at the frames and counting the people, you'll see that we've only got about 20. So what we did is we would get coverage, we would go through the entire song, which wasn't very long, from one angle, get it till we felt like the performance was good, and then we would move for another shot, get another angle, and what we would do is basically herd all the people over to the other side. And one thing that we tried to do is we tried to shuffle the people, so whoever was in the front row in one shot is not in the front row in the next shot, so that way hopefully we're not recognizing that it's all the same people. Also, what we did to kind of help obscure things is that we just completely filled that place with haze. One pro tip, make sure from the person that you're renting the location from that it's okay to do haze. We kind of went for the ask for forgiveness thing. And for the hazer, we used the Real EFX DF50 diffusion hazer. As far as all the shoots that I've been on, I feel like this is the hazer that's on all the sets. So it's really safe to use. It's not smoke. You can be breathing it in. I mean, you don't want to sit there at the hazer and just huff it for hours, but it's pretty safe. It hangs in the air quite a while, and it kind of adds just this nice texture to it if you have some backlight going on. But when we were all done and the landlord came and saw all the haze, he was not happy with us, which is not always a good feeling, especially when you're representing Christ and a church, to kind of break the rules. But anyways, it helped make it look awesome. So what that kind of helped do is it kind of helped obscure the background because it's so hazy and it falls off into the shadows. Kind of alludes to maybe there could be more people. We don't know how deep the space is, and it also just makes things look really cool. So going back to our lighting, the top light that was bouncing off that bleached muslin, that didn't do a ton. If you look at some of these screen grabs here, you'll see that it just gave just a little bit of level to Propaganda's face. We kind of wanted it to be dark and moody, so we didn't want anybody to be too front lit. So it just does enough to help you kind of see his face and his eyes and his mouth and help him not really even pop from the screen, but just helps you see it a little bit. But what we really did is we relied on the 650s in the background to help give him a background edge, and also an edge on the people in the background to help separate them from kind of that mushy, milky black abyss in the background that the haze was creating. That really helped. And then also what it did is it created this really cool effect as these lights would be hitting the lens. And I guess I should talk a little bit about the lenses we used real quick. So we used the Canon 50mm 1.2 L series and the Canon 100mm 100 millimeter 2.8. But what we also used was the Lettuce Anamorphics Pro 1.3 adapter. Again, this was 4 years ago, so there's probably some better options out there now, like maybe using real anamorphic lenses. But we knew that we wanted to do anamorphic. We wanted it to be really cinematic, to feel really different than any of the other sermon bumpers that we've done before. And we also wanted to get crazy with the flares. I mean, this was 4 years ago. J.J. Abrams was at his peak flare-tasticness with all the Star Trek movies and stuff. So we wanted to kind of recreate that look. So the anamorphic adapter, as you can see through a lot of this footage and a lot of these frame grabs, you get all these flares going across. And I did a little bit of stalking to find out how J.J. Abrams pulled off all those flares, and learned that he literally just had guys with these big xenon flashlights shining it right in the lens. So I did what any responsible filmmaker would do, is I tracked down where I could find one about 150 miles away up in LA, and I drove up there on a Saturday after I think it was like an 8-hour trip to rent this flashlight for like $150. And so sometimes, you know, like there's a lot of things in production that seems like a really inefficient use of your time, but I would say let your passion be your guide. If there's something that you want to do to take your project to the next level, it's probably going to be totally inefficient. It might not even work, but totally go for it, because that's what makes this whole thing fun. So I went and got that flashlight, super powerful, and as you can see here, we had our friend Evan. He was literally just flashing the barrel of the lens all throughout all these takes, and what that is doing is that's creating these kind of washout effects, but also adding all these extra flares into the footage. So it's really kind of like an organic special effect. And that flashlight that we got was actually, it's called a Maxa-Beam Searchlight, and it's in a ton of movies like Jurassic Park, pretty much any movie where the characters have these giant flashlights and they're wiping them across the lens and you're getting these awesome flares. It's probably a good chance that it's going to be this Maxa-Beam Searchlight. And I guess at this point I should probably break down the rest of our camera package. So we were using the church's Canon C500 recording to the Odyssey 7Q recorder. My hunch is that we were filming in ProRes. Maybe it was RAW, I don't remember. I also don't remember if we were filming in 4K or not. I think we were. But yeah, we were doing that with our kind of own Frankenstein shoulder rig that I kind of put together between some Lettuce parts and some Red Rock Micro parts. We also had the Red Rock Micro handheld kit, which if you don't have an AC pulling focus for you, in my mind, I feel like that's the only way you can actually operate a shoulder rig, by keeping both hands on the rig but still being able to pull focus with the finger wheel. We've done that for several of our narrative projects, and yeah, it probably would have been better if we had an AC and you just don't worry about focus, but I feel like that worked out pretty good. It's kind of weird getting used to, especially when you're using photo lenses, but we put gear adapters on there so we could pull the focus. So that might be worth checking out or renting if you're looking into kind of doing some more narrative work where you need finer control of your focus and you're not just putting your hands on the lens and trying to pull focus on a little photo lens. I want to encourage you guys and gals to just always be pushing yourself creatively. Even if you think that you don't have the skill level quite to pull something off, give it a try. If you look at this project, we did all sorts of silly stuff. If you look at the lighting setups that we had, the gear that we used, even just dropping a mic, cutting a hole through bleached muslin and dropping a mic, there was all sorts of stuff we did that if I were to do this project over now, I would do it all over again. But the interesting thing is that at the end of the day, it might not actually even look that much better, because there's something magical. God just totally meets you and hooks you up, and the Holy Spirit breathes life into your project when you get out and you try it. It's kind of almost like the parable of the talents. All God is wanting you to do is actually take with what you have and actually try something, and then He brings the increase. He totally makes it so much better than you could have ever made it. But that'll never happen if you sit on the sidelines, if you bury your talents. So even if you feel like in your current job, or if you're a volunteer or a contractor and there's not enough time or budget, or even organizationally, like maybe the church isn't as supportive as you would like of your creative ideas, I say go for it. Do whatever you can to push forward and try to express your creativity, because you will be surprised at what the Holy Spirit will do through that, and the people that God will bring around you to help you. And worst case scenario, you try something, it doesn't work, you learn a ton, and you're that much more equipped for the next one. And I think at this point I'm pretty much rambling, so I will stop so we can finish this video. If you're interested in more, there's going to be another video probably below this one or in the show notes that will be extended behind the scenes footage, so you can watch the whole day of how we did this. You can watch some of the outtakes and just kind of be a fly on the wall. So I'd encourage you to watch that. And so that wraps it up for this video. If you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you're on the website, subscribe to the Church Filmmakers newsletter. So thanks again, and I'll see you next time.